Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bolt Report. As always, my name is Jake Ricker. Alongside me is my good friend and co-host Michael Wax. Michael, we are back for another season recap video. Unfortunately, this one comes on a little bit of a disappointing note as the Lightning were eliminated by the Florida Panthers in round one in 5 games. So tough pill to swallow, I think, for Lightning fans, but we're going to break it all down. We're going to take a look at how the season ended, what's ahead for the Lightning, what they're going to have to do in this offseason. Was this a disappointment? We'll answer all those questions and more. So it should be a fun one nonetheless. How you doing today?
It's a week later, and it still hurts. You never want to see your team get knocked out of playoffs, especially early. And with the early loss 2 years in a row now, there's some questions that we'll dive into, and we'll see what this roster looks like come draft night, July 1st, and then preseason.
Well, let's start with the loss to the Florida Panthers. Let's start with how they played this year. Because, it was interesting to me, Michael. I think going into the end of the regular season, into the playoffs, yes, the Lightning did stumble a little bit. But overall, I think most people felt pretty good. They had a really good couple of top guys in the top lines, especially Nikita Kucherov, who was playing out of his mind once again. He just got nominated for another MVP. Hopefully he wins that. We'll get to that later. But the Lightning were still playing very well. They were one of the best power plays in the NHL. And then the first round, it seemed like every single game, they could not get off to a good start. And they just were not playing nearly as good as the Florida Panthers were. Credit to them, absolutely. Credit where credit is due. The Panthers just kind of outplayed the Lightning in what felt like almost every single game, except for game 4, where the Lightning did have a fantastic game. Now, there were the 2 disallowed goals that happened to the Lightning in game 5 when they were trying to force that game 6. I did feel like they played good in game 6. But again, for the most part, it just felt like the Lightning were always fighting from behind in these series, and you can only do that so many times before it catches up to you, and it did to the Lightning, losing in 5 games.
It was a very interesting contrast to last year. If you think about the first round defeat to the Maple Leafs, I want to say the Lightning were winning in 2 of their 4 losses. And in this one, they held 1 lead in their 4 losses. So, it doesn't seem like that big of a number, but when the objective is to get to 4 wins, that's with the way that the series went, the Lightning not getting a lead in game 1, okay, you can attribute that to, like starting slow, starting at 12:30, which is kind of ridiculous, but whatever. Game 2, they started off slow, and by the time they caught up, it was too late. The OT winner, it felt like they were running on fumes trying to tie that game up. And so when you get down 3-0, I talked myself into Lightning 7. I won't lie. Like, just as an optimistic fan, I talked myself into Lightning 7. It really looked at that, to jumpstart the Lightning in game 4. And then, game 5 happens, and I'm not even going to get into the officiating in that game. But, as soon as they go down 3-1, 4-1, you kind of thought, okay, this is the moratorium of the Lightning pretty much. And it's tough to, again, as I've said before, it's tough when you go out this early. And for all of the doom and gloom about this series, about them not starting on time or anything like that, a couple bounces, maybe they're in the second round. Like, they did tie game 2. Game 1 was a 1-goal game. Game 3 was a 1-goal game before the empty netter.
Yeah.
Like, they
but the save from Bobrovsky, like that puck's a couple inches lower, and it's a different series.
The ironic thing, he slides it across the ice, which is what you're not supposed to do, and it goes in. Instead, he shoots it high, which is what you're supposed to do, and Bobrovsky makes it. So the bounces hurt. They really did, but also they just didn't play well enough, and sometimes you have to accept that.
Yeah, and listen, there's multiple parts to every game. There is the bounces, that's a big part of it, but there's also your play. The Lightning constantly did not start on time, which is a big reason they did not win this series. They had their chances, especially the power play. I mean, listen, the Lightning coming in the playoffs, yeah, I know. They had the best power play in the NHL. I think they still finished fifth all time in regular season power play percentage. Now, the power play did falter towards the end of the regular season. We saw some issues with it. But most people, I think, attributed that to, well, this is what the Lightning typically do. They kind of start, slowing down before you hit into the regular season. But the power play was terrible in the postseason, and that was a big thing that hurt them. I mean, they got plenty of chances. You can't listen. I know the officiating was frustrating with the goals that were taken away in Game 6, but again, at the end of the day, they had their chances to come back in the series and convert on the power play, and it just wasn't there. And I think now, I don't know how your take on this, Michael. For me, it was more of credit to the Panthers because the times we saw the Lightning power play struggle, like one time, for example, in the regular season was against Toronto. Toronto did a great job of shutting down the Lightning power play where they were very aggressive and not letting the Lightning get things set up, which is usually where they thrive. And the Panthers, I thought, did that very well. They did not let the Lightning get things set up almost never. And the Lightning just couldn't combat that.
I'll agree to a certain extent. Game one and probably game two. Yeah, I think the Lightning had a power play goal in game one. I think it was Stamkos with like 8 seconds to go or whatever it is. But the Panthers did a really good job of combating the Lightning, not allowing the Lightning to set up. When they did set up, they did a really good job of plugging lanes. At a certain point, it goes from the Panthers did a really good job to the Lightning did not adjust. And if you had told me at the beginning of the playoffs that the Lightning would operate at a 20% power play success rate, by the way, what is that, 10% lower than the regular season? 20% is still not bad. That's one in every, 5 chances. They looked terrible setting up on most of those opportunities. The Lightning saw what the Panthers were doing, and I could say this at 5-on-5 as well, and they did not adjust at all. Specifically, and we're doing player preview articles or player recap articles with grades. Thank God I'm not writing the Nikita Kucherov one because I was not happy with this first round performance.
Well, to be fair, I think some of our player grades will focus more on the regular season, which for that, Kucherov is going to get an A+. Which, by the way, if you want to see those articles, which will be coming out very soon, highly recommend you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll be doing some shorts as well for that stuff, or you can go to our website, which is right down there below, boltreporttv.com, and check out those awesome articles. We'll be posting them on Twitter. Should be a lot of fun. A lot of off-season content coming your way, even though the season is over for the Lightning. And one last thing about the series, I think we need to give credit to Steven Stamkos, who had such an unbelievable playoff run, such a second half. I mean, ever since the second half, I think he knew, like, okay, I'm not playing well. This is a contract year. And he stepped up in a big way. I mean, he was fantastic for the Lightning through those entire 5 games. So credit to the captain for really coming through. And I also want to talk about Steven Stamkos because, of course, if you were listening to the ESPN national broadcast, which I know you were, Michael, you got to hear nonstop about how this could be the last game for the Tampa Bay Lightning. But I don't think that's going to happen. I do believe Steven Stamkos is coming back. Listen, there was a lot to go through from the exit interviews, which, again, if you want to get a kind of a recap of those exit interviews, there's an article on our website that Michael wrote, which you can go check out at boltreporttv.com. Links are also in the description as well. But basically, from the exit interviews, nothing's changed. Stamkos still seems like he wants to stay in Tampa. JVB wants to have him stay a Bolt for life. They just have to find that magic number. What that magic number will be, I don't know. I think everybody understands that it's going to be lower than what he's currently being paid. But Stamkos had a great run there right at the end of the season, and I expect him to fully be back.
I hope so. He played really well in that second half of the year and in the playoffs. I'm going to attribute that to my article, which, again, you can read boltreporttv.com, where I kind of detailed in the first half of the year how he was really struggling. Not necessarily in point production, but just overall play, 5-on-5, things like that. He really turned it up in the second half of the year. And it's one of those things where you look at it and you go, okay, He is getting older. Are things changing? But I think he showed at the second half of the year and in the playoffs, like he could still dominate. He could still be one of the best players on the team. And in the playoffs, the best skater on the team. I don't think that's any question at all. Not even in just point production, but he was everywhere. He really, really believes in this team trying to win a Stanley Cup again. He wants to create that legacy. And so I'm a little worried about the number. I won't lie. Like you said, you think it might be lower than what he's making now. That's not a guarantee. Like I have vastly been wrong about what I think players are going to get, whether it's been higher or lower. And so I hope I'm wrong about this, but I
Mhm.
don't know because I look at someone like Alex Ovechkin, who's one of the greatest goal scorers of all time, and yes, he took something that was less than what he was making previously, but wasn't that much. And so it'll be one of those things where I hope it doesn't put a handicap on the Lightning to really continue forward. But again, he deserves everything that he's provided to this organization.
And it's something he talked about in his exit interview again, where he said, listen, he knows a lot of guys, basically everybody that signed a long term contract with the Lightning, have taken less than they could have gotten in market value. Just Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, Andre Vasilevsky, they're all extremely underpaid. If they went on the free market, they would have gotten a lot more. And the Lightning do have advantages with the state income tax, with the hometown discount, if you will. So there's a number of things that play into this. You're probably right, Michael. Like he deserves a number much more than we probably wanted to get him for. But it just goes back to the question of does Stamkos want to move? Does the Lightning want to pay that much? There's so many factors that go into this, which is why I don't envy JBB's position here. But again, to me, he wants to stay. The Lightning want to have him. I think they can make that number work, and I think they can absolutely still be competitive. But before we look too far ahead into what's upcoming here for the Lightning in this offseason, which is going to be a big one, because thank goodness, by the way, the cap is going up. So finally, after dealing with the flat cap, and that was a big reason the Lightning lost so many players, the Lightning are going to get helped out in a big way when it comes to the cap jumping up. But Michael, I wanted to ask this question: is this season a disappointment to you? Because, this is where you get into that whole argument of like, well, the Lightning had a ton of success. Listen, they won back-to-back Stanley Cups, made 3 straight finals, which is so hard to do. Vegas just got eliminated in the first round as the defending Stanley Cup champions. A lot of defending champions lose in round 1 the next year. Just goes to show you how hard it is to get all the way back, let alone to do it 3 times in a row. So Lightning have had a lot of success. But for you this season, is it a disappointment? I think is the question.
I think if you had told me at the beginning of the year, especially if we had talked about, oh, they're rested and they're ready to go, a first round loss, especially in last games, yeah, that would be a disappointment. But you look at where they were at certain points of the year, and it's not a shock that they made the playoffs, but it's definitely a surprise that they finished as comfortably as they did, where it looked like they were going to be fighting for that wild card 2 spot for a while, and they had a surge and they pulled ahead. And again, 5 games in April doesn't dictate or shouldn't dictate what a positive season this was for a lot of players. It's one of those things where yes and no. It is a failure because they believe that they should win a Stanley Cup every single year in that locker room, and it's not a failure because of the trials and tribulations that they had to go through to even make the playoffs.
Yeah, I listen, for me, obviously it's a disappointment. As a diehard Lightning fan, you want to see the team go as far as they can every single year, and losing to the Florida Panthers is always tough. I mean, it is our rival, no matter what. Even though, yes, it is the state of hockey, it's good to see the Florida state hockey, the state of hockey in Florida do well. But in that sense, it's definitely a disappointment because I thought they could have absolutely played better and maybe made it into our second round. But and you try to take that big approach, that big picture look, and you look at it from that perspective, and it's really hard to call it a disappointment because you're right. Listen, a lot of people had the Lightning as not even making the playoffs this year, and they made the playoffs and comfortably, as you talked about there. So there were a lot of positives from that sense. But at the end of the day, listen, there's a reason they say this is the hardest trophy to win in sports. It's not easy. The Lightning have made it look very easy over the last couple of years. We've been very lucky to watch that. All right, so last thing here is kind of looking ahead. We talked about Steven Stamkos, but he's not the only free agent the Lightning have to deal with. There's a couple of other guys that are coming up on needing new contracts. There's guys like Hedman who are entering their final year of the deal for next season. And again, normally the Lightning like to sign those players a year early. Stamkos had a little bit of a different situation here. But Michael, what is the kind of outlook here for the Bolts when it comes to contract and re-signing guys?
Well, right now, and this is according to Cap from the fantastic website, because of the cap jumping $4 million, the Lightning currently have a roster size of 16 players. They have a cap space of $12.385 million. And some notable names include guys like Anthony Duclair, Steven Stamkos, Matt Dumba in terms of salary, not necessarily in terms of being a notable name on that third pair. Mitchell Chafee is a UFA, not an RFA. I know that surprised a lot of people. And then there are contracts coming off the books and retentions coming off the books, like Pat Maroon, Adam Henrique, former Lightning legend Adam Henrique from the trade deadline. Philippe Myers' buried penalty is also coming off the books. They have more money than I think a lot of people were expecting, but that money is quickly going to be taken away by the contracts of Stamkos and Duclair and whoever else they might get in free agency.
And these things can be really hard to gauge because, again, we don't know what Steven Stamkos is going to sign for. Would he sign for 6 or 7? Would he sign for 5 million? We don't know. There's a lot of factors that come into negotiations to figure those things out. I think the Lightning can absolutely re-sign a couple. Like I would love to, obviously Stamkos, to me personally, has to come back. I think he will. I would love to see Duclair back. I thought he played really well with the Bolts late in the season, and with the more time he spends with the Lightning, I think he could get better. I love Duclair. Mitchell Chafee, I thought was great for the Lightning this season as one of the young guns. See him back. Dumba, he was okay. I don't think he was terrible, but maybe on a super cheap deal, you could bring him back too. So I think there's a lot of guys that I think I want to see come back for the Lightning. Do you feel the same, Michael?
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to ask you, is there one name in particular, Stamkos aside, everybody wants to see Stamkos, that you want to see back in a Lightning sweater as a UFA?
Well, since I'm not allowed to say Stamkos, I think I would go Duclair. Honestly, I think I was really impressed with his play. He fit in very nicely to make a. Because listen, when we lost guys like Killorn, the top 6 really took a hit. We thought maybe Sherry could get into that role. He had a very bad year, though. It just wasn't working out great for him. Hopefully, he'll bounce back in year 2. But Duclair, I think, really fit into that top 6 role. He's my guy that I absolutely want to see back, and I would be surprised if he doesn't come back.
Yeah, for me, it's Tyler Mott. I love Tyler Mott. He was fantastic as a third or fourth liner, great penalty killer. He is one of those guys that, again, if it wasn't for Josh Archibald not wanting to play for the Lightning like 2 weeks before the season, Tyler Mott would have never played for the Lightning. And it was one of those happy circumstances that I would love to have him back.
Yeah, him and Glendening, I thought were both really good for the Lightning
Mhm.
this year as those bottom 6 guys. They were fantastic. And you're absolutely right. Would love to see Tyler Mott back, a couple of those guys as well. So there's some big decisions to be made for JBB. And again, it's hard for us to kind of exactly say, all right, here's who they should sign. Here's how much it should be for, because there's so many factors that go into these things. But I can promise you one thing, we'll have a ton of content throughout the offseason covering all of this stuff. We'll be making videos about all the new signings, things going on in free agency, who they could be looking for to sign, all that content right here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on our website, on Twitter, wherever you may find our social media. Highly recommend you subscribe or follow us wherever that may be so you don't miss out on that future content. But Michael, any last things before we wrap up here on the Lightning's overall season?
It's going to suck without hockey for a little bit. Hopefully, I know you plugged our content. We had a lot of really good interviews, especially in the back half of that season. And hopefully we can get some more interviews for you guys coming into the summer and, approaching the rookie camp in the preseason.
Maybe let us know down in the comments below who you would want to see on this podcast, and we can try and get them on here for you guys very, very soon. But thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if you want to follow us on whatever platform it may be, links as always are in the description. At @BoltReport_TV is usually where you can find us, no matter what platform you're on. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Go Bolts!